Well, hi, everybody. I'm
Hello,
spiritual
everyone.
medium Kellee White, and I'm also a psychotherapist.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shirley Impellizzeri. I'm a psychologist, and welcome to Psychology in the Soul.
We're so glad you're joining us today. How are
Yeah,
you doing tonight, Shirley?
I'm doing well. Yeah,
Good,
yeah. The
good.
weather's not great here in LA, but I'm not complaining because it's LA.
All right,
But
exactly. And
yeah,
here it's actually kind of lovely, but a lot of rain, but it's kind of lovely. We're, actually
yeah,
moving into spring, which I'm so excited about. But
yeah, yeah.
Shirley, we have a really interesting topic tonight
We
because
sure do.
so many people have commented on feeling dysregulated
Mhm.
at this
Yeah,
where we are at this time on earth. There's a lot of
yes,
emotional dysregulation, and
yeah,
so I thought we would talk about tonight. We're going to talk about emotional regulation, how to be regulated in a really dysregulated world.
yeah, yeah. It's so necessary and so important to have tools. Not going to take away the dysregulation because we're living it. And you may also be going through something personal that's causing dysregulation,
Right.
but important to have tools to give the nervous system and yourself, your mind and body, a break.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, because we are living in a time where surely the world feels loud and fast and uncertain.
Yeah.
And for many people, it's what you just said. I mean, it's if we just take the everything that's going on in the world and then add our own personal problems to this, it's
Right.
not just stressful, but frankly, it's overwhelming. And
Completely.
what we're seeing right now isn't really just emotional reaction. This is a nervous system dysregulation on a global scale.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
talk about things astrologically. This is a big, big time on Earth to be here. And so it is absolutely upsetting our nervous systems. And so
Yeah.
this widespread phenomenon, if you will, it's largely driven by a combination of several things here. We've got high stress environments. I mean,
Mm.
really high stress. I mean, gas is going up. I mean, that's something that will, could get you really stressed up about.
Right.
There,
Right.
the political landscapes, it's a constant mind. Like
Mm.
it's constantly changing. And then we have technological changes. Cheryl, I just bought a new laptop. I had to be really big and brave to go to the Apple store to do that,
Right.
because what am I going to have to learn and how much time do I have to learn it?
Right.
And
Right. Right.
also there's like, unfortunately, there are reduced social support systems for many people right now, you know, and
Yeah.
if we take, global events, just global events, we have, massive shared traumas like natural
Yeah.
disasters, war, okay,
Right. Right.
pandemics. I mean, we
Right.
did live through that, but God knows if it's coming back or anything like that.
Right.
So it's a really a big time for global dysregulation, and it affects mental health, it affects spiritual health, spiritual
Mhm.
well-being, and then of course physical well-being.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. I mean, we're living in a time where we're exposed to more information,
Mhm.
more fear-based messaging, more uncertainty than previous generations because it's so available to us.
Yeah. Well,
You
it's
know,
on our phone.
well, absolutely. I mean, I used to scroll on Instagram just to get a little bit of comedic levity, funny
Right.
dog videos, funny cat videos, that kind of thing, a comedian here and there. Now I have to really purposely either keep scrolling or find that purposely because otherwise I'm getting political stuff, I'm getting what's happening, and and of course I want to know, I want to be informed, but
Right.
you really need to monitor that because too much of it, you don't realize how much it's getting in. In addition to that, the brain is constantly scanning for threat because we have that negativity bias. I'm sure I've talked about this
You
before.
have, but could you talk a little bit about that scanning for threat? What does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it means that that's how the species survived. We had to know where the threat was so we can avoid it, so we can not walk into it. And so we had to be scanning for it all the time. The amygdala scans like I can't even remember how, every 1 second, it's scanning for threat, scanning for threat. And so together with that negativity bias, then we can really, really keep our nervous systems at high stress without even realizing it. And when the system is overactivated, the body can't distinguish between perceived danger or actual danger, especially if you came from a very kind of what felt like a chaotic or dangerous childhood.
Right.
We're in that fight or flight state all the time, and we don't even realize it.
Oh, my God, Cheryl.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to talk about how to come back to yourself. So it's not by escaping the world, although I'm sure many of us have thought about that. It's learning how to regulate within this and understanding dysregulation.
Right. Because emotional regulation, it's the ability to respond to experiences without becoming overwhelmed. I mean, we do become overwhelmed, but noticing that and finding ways to regulate ourselves, and dysregulation happens when the nervous system moves into fight.
Can you explain like what fight is, and then we'll go into them a little bit?
Anything that overstates the nervous system.
Okay.
The brain.
It's a response.
It's a response. It's an adaptive response to save our lives. Everything is about survival. And so anything that overwhelms the nervous system, the brain, primitive part of the brain, so we have no control over it, will go into fight or flight.
So it's an instant thing.
It's an impulse.
It's an impulse.
It's an impulse that saved the species, that kept the species alive. Right. So it comes from, it's a primitive impulse. And so, and it can be categorized as we've heard, fight or flight. Fight is fighting back. Kicking, screaming, verbalization is part of the fight response.
Let me ask you something. Is that a learned response, or is that just, how does this?
It just happens.
Okay.
We don't think. And so that's why it's so important to understand that these are impulses. We have the thinking part of the brain has gone offline, and we have no control over this. So there's some people that, that say, well, this happened and I didn't do anything. I froze. And that's because the primitive part of the brain in that second assessed that freezing would keep you alive. And that's why
some animals do that. Some animals.
Exactly.
Fake death.
So it's not something we think, because, the other fun is flight, of course, taking off and running.
Okay.
And then freeze. A shutdown, a numbness where you absolutely just don't respond. And I was working with this one woman who unfortunately got raped, and she said, I didn't fight back, I just froze. And she felt so bad and so guilty, and then of course, unfortunately, many times there's judgment of other people. And even when we're hearing a story in the news, why didn't they get up and run or something? We need to understand, and we need to trust that the brain is doing what it assesses in that moment that's going to keep the person alive.
So is that part of somebody's operating system? And also on top of that, the traumas that they would have had in life that would put them in that whatever position they were in to have that response? Because some people do freeze, some people do have flight, they run, and some people fight. It's interesting to me. I've worked with a lot of clients that really I can watch them freeze.
Yeah, it's part of our temperament, but we tend to go a certain way. Like, I'll never forget when I was learning about this, I was reading an article, and I've always thought, I wish I could just disappear and live in Tahiti forever, Yeah. And I used to have a very good friend of mine that would just say, I was so angry, I would just rip her face off, And then I read in this article, if people are stuck in flight, you might hear them say things like, I just want to disappear. I just want to go away, never come back. Wow. And it said when some people are stuck in fight, they might say things like, and it literally quoted, I just want to tear her face off. And
my God. I've heard so many people say, I just want to scalp them. I've heard some unbelievable stories about fight.
And that means when we're stuck, that just means that we have some unhealed wounds.
Yeah.
And so the nervous system has gotten, has the impulse of fight or flight or even freeze.
Right. And freeze could also bring numbness, right? All of a sudden you feel numb.
Yeah. Freeze is a shutdown, a numbness. So sometimes when I'll be working with someone with trauma, all of a sudden they just kind of go into this dissociated state.
Explain what dissociated state looks like.
Well, it looks like, the body's there, but there's no one home. And it's a very adaptive.
Great description.
Yeah. It's very adaptive. It's protective. We need to thank our brains for being so wise and doing what it needed to do to save ourselves from whatever threat we were under. When I work with people that are stuck in the freeze response, what they noticed many times is I had this one woman that I was working with that felt cold tingling down her arms. And that let me know that the nervous system was releasing that freeze energy, that impulse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So these are survival responses. They're not personality flaws. It's an important thing. And there's no difference. There's no right or wrong. If you tend to be more in the fight or be more in the flight or even the freeze, there's no right or wrong. It's just the way your nervous system,
So
works.
So it'd be interesting for people that are listening to this if they can think of a situation that happened. Did they freeze? What did they get into? Did they fight? I always tend to go into fight. I think
Yeah.
that my name Kellee means warrior, so I think by design I just go into
Right.
fight.
Right.
Flight, and some people might again choose freeze, and it's not as you mentioned, it's not a personality disorder. We're not talking about that.
No, it's not a personality flaw. It's not that there's
Adaptation.
something wrong. Why didn't I fight back and I just took off running? I mean, I tend to veer more towards the flight, but it doesn't mean that I won't get angry sometimes and yell and use that response.
So you can vacillate between any.
Oh yeah.
These.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
And what cause chronic exposure to stress, uncertainty, fear-based messaging can keep the nervous system stuck in these states.
Right.
And so it's important to notice that. And of course, we may not know, but we can feel. That's why the connection between mind and body is so important.
Boy, is that true? More than ever.
Yeah.
Really. Because so many people, they don't even realize that they're dysregulated.
They don't. Sometimes, I'll have someone sitting across from me and I'll notice their shoulders are here and they're talking like there's nothing going on. And I'll say, let's wait a minute. Let me invite you to lower your shoulders. And all of a sudden I see it. Even myself, if I'm,
Right.
lying in bed reading or something like that, all very consciously and very purposely tune into my body and notice where my shoulders are. Notice if I'm noticing my, back of my legs against the bed, my back against the pillows if I'm sitting up, and really connect with the body to notice if there's any stress points.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Well, so many people that don't know that they're dysregulated, and I really specifically want to talk about empaths because we have so many empaths that are watching the show and listening to this, and empaths feel everything. So empaths may be very dysregulated during this time period that we're in. But for everybody in empaths, you might feel some of the signs to look for to see if you're dysregulated. You might feel tired. How many people have I heard? I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Yeah. This energy is fierce. It's fierce, right? And irritable. So many people are irritable. Oh my gosh. And they're disconnected. So many disconnected. And also, Shirley, it's a big one, like on edge. Like wait, because it's true. Like, like when's the next text coming in that this happened or that happened?
Right.
And as you pointed out, like this, our grandparents didn't live this way. They had big ticket situations. But this is a bombardment.
Well, right. They weren't bombarded with it.
No, they didn't. In fact, some of them didn't even have phones.
Right. Or they saw the nightly news. So it was one, maybe an hour in the evening, and that was it.
It was Walter Cronkite. It was easy. And people are on edge or they're completely numb. So that's not who you are. It is not who you are, but that is your nervous system asking for support.
Right. Yeah. I love the way that you're saying that because it is. We need to know what, the communication, what the body is communicating to the mind. So when we feel that is the nervous system, the body asking for support.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay.
And, we're currently living in what can be described as a fear amplified environment with everything, as you said, going on in the world. And I'd love your take on, from an astrological and just spiritual, why now? I know you've said it before, but, my left brain always wants to understand, why this.
I can tell you, I mean, we're so spiritually, this energy is set for growth. And a growth is where we feel our soul knows it's time to move and to make decisions and to make some changes because our soul knows why we're here. We are specifically here to grow. So what grows us very quickly is chaos. Chaos grows us quickly.
Interesting.
Yep,
Wow.
it just does. And so being in the center of chaos is sometimes it's referred to as the eye of the storm. We've all heard
Yeah.
that one before.
Yeah.
But it holds
Mhm.
profound spiritual significance because it represents a state of inner peace or spiritual maturity. And it's actually a direct invitation for transformation. So I've mentioned this many, many times, but I worked with a guru, which I did back in the day. And who taught me how to meditate. But the form of meditation was we had to be in, I don't care if it was Times Square, with all the stress around it to be able to go inward. So it really was unique at that time. I didn't understand it. I used to say, but isn't it easier to just go into a cave and meditate, go quietly and meditate? Because frankly, it is.
Yeah.
You would say there's no point to that. You have to be able to be still even in chaos. And so what I'm about to say is not to look at if you are dysregulated, but the goal here, there's a goal here. And then looking at this is not a sign of punishment, but being centered within the chaos often indicates a moment, if you will, of intense spiritual growth. And what do I mean by that? Yeah, it means where old structures fall apart that allow for new, more authentic creations to arise. And they call this the birthplace of new creation, and it is from chaos. So why now? Right? Why now? Chaos is seen actually spiritually is called the formless void. And that exists just before, Cheryl, a new higher order or a new creation within occurs. So it's what we call a necessary clearing phase.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I can see that why everything has converged.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
Now that it's really set for this.
Yeah.
For dysregulation.
Yeah. Right. Because we've been kind of going from worse to, what happens also is we can feel dysregulated when we don't feel safe. Anxiety isn't random. It's a response to a perceived lack of safety. And so when we don't feel safe, like in this sense of, government supposed to take care of us, or the world is supposed to be kind of a calm place, and that kind of feels like a global sense of safety. When all of that is kind of going haywire,
it's unraveling.
Right? Then that can really affect us. And the important thing is that emotions give us information. So as I've said many times, to be curious about what am I noticing? Why am I feeling this way? Let me be curious about that. Because what emotions are, which can cause dysregulation also, is really, one of my teachers used to say, emotions are simply a dysregulated nervous system. If we view it that way.
Yeah.
And so what is that emotion communicating with us? If I'm sad, what am I sad about? What felt hurtful? Right. What if I'm angry, what crossed my boundary? And therefore then what might I need to do to feel safe again, to set a boundary to feel safe again? Right. Yeah.
Right. Because we're living in what would be described as a fear amplified environment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. With as we've been saying, constant news cycles, social media, and there's an uncertainty about the future.
Oh yeah.
We see the gas prices going up, the stock going down. I mean, we don't know the value of the dollar. I mean, that's as you said before, it's not only just individual, it's global.
Right. Well, it's global, and it used to be, I guess my mother used to say, used to be's don't count anymore. But it's true. It used to be, not that long ago when we only had to worry about this or this or this or this, which was always a lot of things. Right. But now it seems like it's a lot. And all of this, keeps the brain, as we talked about, like in a heightened state of vigilance.
Right. Exactly. And so it's important also when you're noticing that is to not isolate. Okay. And it's easy to isolate scrolling through social media or something like that, but you're doing that alone. So it's very important to, when they say misery loves company, I mean, I think that saying came because we feel more supported when we know that other people are going through something similar. It feels a little safer when we know that other people are going through the same thing. So it's very important in these times to find community.
Yeah. It
to
is. Yeah.
find people who can kind of share in. That's why the support groups, like grieving support groups, are so wonderful, because everybody is experiencing a similar thing and there's community there, and you can feel seen and heard and understood at a level that can feel safe, even though you're going through,
Right.
through a difficult time. And that also includes kind of this global uncertainty that we're going through now.
Right. Because energetically, when we talk about that, James has always talked about there are two emotions, or that fear and love,
Yeah.
and it's spiritually. And so, but energetically, fear spreads.
Yeah.
And so, an empath out there, this one. You can walk into a room and feel the energy immediately. You can walk anywhere and you feel the energy, right?
Yeah.
And but here's the truth with that. It doesn't mean that fear is present, or if just because fear is present, I should say, it doesn't mean that it belongs to you. And I always say, is this mine? Like if I start to feel anxiety or something coming up, or fear or any of that, I'll go, who does this belong to? As an empath, as a medium, as a therapist, it's a good thing to do. Does this belong to me? Who is this about?
Right.
This person? Is this about this person in my life? What's going on? So I've really learned to differentiate between what is mine and what's not mine.
I love that you're saying that, Kel, because it is so, so important. So many people who aren't aware of their own stuff, just because they're not,
Right.
it's many times project what's going on with them onto you.
Right.
So anytime that someone accuses you of something, or someone says something and you're going, oh, like it doesn't resonate with you.
Right.
That might be what they're feeling, but they're not aware of it. It's very difficult for them to be aware of it, and they're projecting on. So it's really important to assess, does this belong to me or not? And if it doesn't, give it back to the person, not in a mean way, but just say, this doesn't belong to me. I'm going to give this back.
Yeah. That's very true, Shirley.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very true. So let's talk about regulation beginning in the body.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, because that's where, the thinking can't regulate our body, because otherwise our professions wouldn't exist. If people can think their way into calmness, or if people can think their way into being okay, then everybody would do it. Right.
Right.
So really what we need to work on is the connection with the body.
Okay.
That's where, and I don't know if I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but the vagus nerve connects the brain to the body, to all the organs, the heart, the viscera. The communication that happens is 20% goes from brain to body.
Okay.
Only 20%. 80% of the communication goes from body to brain.
Wow.
So when you tell yourself, relax, it's only a 20% signal strength. But if you very purposely relax your body, that's an 80%, signal strength that your body is saying to the brain, we're good, we're safe. And then the whole system can relax. That's why it's so important to have that connection with the body. And if you don't know if you're anxious, then there's an exercise that you can do where you exaggerate the movement. So exaggerate this. Notice what that feels like. And then slowly come back down. Yeah. And many times, just like I did, your body will just take a spontaneous deep breath.
Yeah.
There are evidence-based tools on how to regulate the body. Grounding is a very important place because it immediately puts you into the body. So that's noticing your feet on the ground. I said when I first started to learn that, I would just put a Post-it on the corner of my computer that said feet. So every time I looked at it, it reminded me to notice my feet. And the more I did that, the more I noticed my feet, the more I was connected, because the body senses things seconds before the brain is aware of it. So many times I'll remember being connected with the body, and I'll notice my stomach tense up without even realizing why. And I'll notice, why did my stomach just tense up? Oh, I had a thought, or something, I remembered something triggered a memory. So that connection is so important, to be able to give us that time, that split second of time to notice that and use a regulation tool so we're not reacting. So we can choose a response as opposed to reaction. There's wonderful grounding techniques on YouTube, because we can ground through the 5 senses. So sensory is noting your feet on the ground. Auditory is noticing the noises around you, the sound of my voice, the sound of, the atmosphere around you. If you're by a busy street, the sound of the cars. Visual grounding, just noticing things around you. The slower that you move these muscles, this is the orienting response. So when you're grounding, you look around the room. And, when animals, right, when they hear a noise, what do they start doing? They look around because they're orienting to see where the danger is. Right. So when you're feeling very dysregulated, a quick tool is, that I've done in my office when people are talking about something that really, really is upsetting to them. I'll go, oh, hey, find 5 pink things. And I know I don't have a lot of pink in my office. So they have to engage their thinking brain to do that. And that pulls them out. So when people are at home, I just notice, I'm looking at a window. Look at how many different trees, the different shades of green. Or what things do I notice on my walls? That's another way. There's also our sensory taste. What am I tasting? Grounding through taste. All right now.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Right. So right now I'm not eating anything. And so I'm just, there's no taste in my mouth. Right. So that's a really important tool, is grounding yourself. And if you only have a minute to do it, just notice your feet.
And give us a breathing exercise if somebody is dysregulated.
The breathing, what I learned, and this really, really kind of changed things for me, is the in-breath stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. And that's the active part of our nervous system. The out-breath stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the resting part of the nervous system. So that's why they have the different counts.
Okay.
So you breathe in at a count of, let's say, 4. You hold it for, let's say, a count of 5, and you breathe out for a count of 8. And so
the
that
longer you breathe out,
right, because that is stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, and that will calm. Naming your emotions. Wow, I'm feeling angry right now. That's a wonderful way, because it kind of puts you a little bit separate from them. And there's a very well-known saying in the neurology world, name it to tame it. For some reason, when we can name our emotions, the intensity of them can come down.
Isn't that interesting?
So, and Thich Nhat Hanh used to give this wonderful thing, because the energy of anger is running through me right now. So it also separated you from your anger. You weren't the anger. You just noticed the energy of sadness is running through me right now.
Oh, I love that,
It's
Shirley.
another wonderful way to kind of separate yourself from the emotion that, in all fairness, you're noticing, but you don't have to react to it. It doesn't have to take over.
Right. Well, and from a spiritual perspective, regulation is about returning to center. So you'll, often hear, I've got to return to center.
Yeah.
And some of those practices might be placing your hand on your heart.
Another wonderful one, yes.
Is that a somatic one too, Cheryl?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one too. I mean, I love how the psychology and the spirituality can blend together, Sitting in stillness without distraction. If you can do that, that's a wonderful place to self-regulate, Stepping outside and reconnecting to nature. I had a real interesting day today, because I was in the middle of, Shirley and I are writing a book, and I'm in the middle of, really heavy duty focus in this book. And I looked out my window. I don't know what made me do it at that exact moment, Shirley, but I looked out this window and I saw the largest bird that I've had in the front, and it was giant. So my housekeeper happened to be here, and I said, "Do you see that?" She said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "What is it?" We both stared, because I thought it was a duck. It was so large. It was actually I think it's called like a giant bluebird. It was a giant bluebird, because we saw him fly away with the wings and everything. But I have to tell you, that reconnecting in the moment
Yeah.
It did something. It was like, oh, okay. Like it gives you new energy. It gives you a refresh. It
Right.
recharges the computer system on some level. It's like, ooh, here we go.
It's wonderful that you're saying that, because it kind of reconnects the brain. When we're
Totally.
dysregulated, we're really coming from the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, and literally the thinking part of the brain goes offline. So that noticing the bird
Yeah.
uses the thinking part of the brain, because you had to identify, oh, it's a bird.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
bird.
Of course, I had to look up the totem,
Of course, of course. But it reconnects the brain.
Totally.
Yeah.
It felt like it gave me this, like I had a cup of tea or something. It was like, oh, plus I'll be thinking about that bird forever. I took a picture of it, but it just doesn't do it justice.
So what was the message?
Basically, about speaking your truth. It was all about speaking your truth.
Wow. Okay.
And I thought that was true. So again, stepping outside with nature. And then here's a great one spiritually, asking this. And I think, and it's the same with psychology. Is this mine? Like, whose is this? Is this mine? So one of the things that I always talk about to return to a spiritual center is meditation. Now, I've often said that meditating, the reason I think it's so important over and over and over, is it trains the mind, it calms the body, but it trains us, it slows the brain down enough to make good choices moving forward. But also, equally as important, it helps to connect to your higher self or source. And what's important about connecting to source, particularly in chaos, if we view chaos as a very strong place for transformation, and that it's designed to help us change, meditation would be the best thing for this. And also, I would say this about chaos, it's kind of viewed spiritually as a test, if you will. It kind of reveals the strength of your faith. And I don't mean religious faith. I'm not talking about that. It's really your capacity for a spiritual and emotional and psychological growth. How much can you take? Now, there are times that I say, okay, I'm done. I cannot take any more. And I turn off. I sit in front of my fireplace. I pet my dog, and I'll have a glass of wine or a martini, something. Anyway, whatever, or not, or have a cup of tea. And I just sit and John will say, what are you doing? And I'll say, nothing. Because I think it's really important, because you have to remember that not everything that you feel is yours to carry.
Right, exactly. And not everything that you feel has to stick with you. You can notice it and then know that it'll pass also. Just when we were talking about different somatic exercises, one where you put one hand here and one hand behind.
What now? Tell me about that.
And you hold yourself like this.
Okay.
It could just be very calming, because you're putting one hand in the kind of the primitive, the base of your brain, and one hand here. There's another one where when you're having big emotions, you can do this. And it feels like you're being held while you're having these big emotions. That's a really helpful.
So like literally taking care of yourself.
Exactly. Not about shutting down the emotion. One of the most beautiful gifts we can give ourselves and gift our kids is learning how to sit in the uncomfortable emotions. And these somatic tools, hand here, can help us get through that moment. It's like, I've always compared it to, many people have, like riding a wave. Sometimes it feels like a tsunami, but waves always pass.
Can you talk about those pillows too, the ones that filled with, I don't know, buckwheat or something in them, that are very comforting if you're regulated?
Well, they're like a weighted blanket.
Okay.
It's just one of my teachers created them. If you go to neuroeffectivetouch.com, I think it is. Maybe Jared, if you can find that, and you can buy the pillows there. There's different shapes. You can put them in the microwave. And when you're having a difficult time, you can just sit it on you. That weight can help. You can use, I've had people use a bag of beans, or a bag of rice, and just put it on you. That's why the weighted blankets work so well for some, especially when we're feeling a lot of anxiety or a lot of emotions. We have a hard time feeling our body. So sometimes another nice thing to do is to just tap down your arms, your legs, your body, so you can feel yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because, and mindfulness is also another beautiful thing. And mindfulness is not about escaping reality. It's about increasing tolerance for the present moment. I went to a mindfulness teacher once, and it was so funny. He was so sweet. He actually taught mindfulness at USC. Thin little guy. And he put us in a meditation, and he said, and now notice your body. And I was feeling incredibly anxious. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you feeling anxious if you're in a meditation? And he goes, and ask yourself, can I be okay with what I'm noticing in this moment? And I thought to myself, no, I can't. I'm feeling anxious. What the hell? And he said, and if not, ask yourself, can I be okay with not being okay with what I'm noticing in this moment? The key was being okay with whatever was happening in that moment. And that is kind of at the core of mindfulness.
Exactly, Shirley. Giving yourself permission. It's okay.
Right. Right now I'm feeling very angry. Right now I'm feeling judgmental against someone. Right now I'm feeling, so you're naming it, you're acknowledging it, you're validating it. That doesn't mean you have to respond to it or react to it.
Right.
Yeah. I sometimes practice like mindfulness dishwashing. So you're just really noticing the water, the soap, the plate that you're holding, the sponge. There's also, I did at UCLA many years ago with Thich Nhat Hanh, mindfulness walking.
What was that like?
And it was wonderful. It was a silent walking meditation. And it was we did it for an hour all through the UCLA campus. And when you're noticing your steps, you're noticing the sounds, you're noticing the trees, just being very mindful of what you're doing in this moment.
Right.
We can even, invite people that are watching, just if you're sitting down, notice the back of your legs on the seat that you're sitting in. Notice if you're on a couch, notice the pillow couches. Notice how the chair or the couch holds your body in that seated position. Just really tools to put you in the here and now.
So Shirley, I have a question for you, because I'm getting a lot of this, and people ask me often with this, some people go right into psych medication if they're too overwhelmed or they're whatever. What do you think? Do you think that instead of it's not instead of, but even if somebody's on different meds, they can still start to learn about reorganizing their own states of mind, right?
Absolutely. I'm not against medication. They were, they're created for a reason. They can be very helpful. And sometimes if your brain, there's I can't remember now, like 700 trillion connections in the brain that have to all work smoothly to, so we can feel okay. And sometimes the brain needs a little bit of help to regulate the neuronic connections. And so it has however, I've also met people who, when they come from a lot of dysregulation, a lot of chaos, a lot of trauma, with years of somatic therapy, that rewires the brain. So they've little by little been able to get off their medication. But increasing the mindfulness, increasing tolerance for the present moment, the research shows that it can reduce stress hormones.
Right,
Sometimes we're taking medication because we're so stressed. It improves emotional regulation. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex connection, which is the thinking part of the brain.
Right.
Decreases reactivity. And that's sometimes what medication can do. You've taught me about homeopathic medication. When someone comes to my office and is considering medication, if they're open to it, I will usually, invite them to see a homeopath just to see what happens. And if that helps, then wonderful. And if it doesn't, sometimes, however, I'll see someone who is so incredibly anxious, I can't work with them at a deeper level because I'm just trying to keep their head above water. So in those cases, I've suggested medication.
Right. And that is very true. It always depending on what the circumstances, what's going on.
Right. So we can go deeper, and then many times they start to taper off their medication. And sometimes people take medication for life, and that is and that's a necessary thing, and that's okay too.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Some people absolutely need it,
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And I appreciate you,
And it
answering that.
stimulates your brain and it makes you feel. I remember I was working with this police officer once, and he was so anxious, and I suggested medication. He was so resistant because, he's not going to take medication. Years later, he thanked me. He said, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have enjoyed, or I would have missed out on so many things. And he just took it, and I call it a vitamin for the brain.
Yeah.
And it didn't give him any other side effects or anything, which is something to also look for. But he said it changed my life.
Right. I've heard that too, Shirley. So true. I
to
mean,
be
everybody
very-
is so unique, whatever they're going through.
Right. And no judgment. No judgment.
Right. And again, when we talk about mindfulness, it's not perfection, and none of this is trying to be perfection. It's just trying to be in the presence. And even as we mentioned, a conscious breath can interrupt some sort of a stress cycle that you're having. In fact, really our show is about being mindful, just paying attention to where you are at the moment, what's going on with you. Because really at any moment that awareness can shift at any possible time.
Exactly. And so going with it, being in tune with the body, and noticing when there's that shift, to go, oh, what just happened, and to be ahead of it. We talk about control sometimes, as a 4-letter word, but I want to be in control of my emotions. I don't want them to control me, and by control, I don't mean suppress or repress them, but I want to know when I'm feeling angry or stressed out or anxious, and notice them, so then I can then use all my tools, to help myself through that moment, as opposed to the emotion controlling me. And if I'm angry, I lose it, and listen, I still do once in a while. We're human. So just because we, you and I have all these wonderful tools, doesn't mean that we're able to use them at all times, and we never have a human moment. So I just want to make that clear.
Exactly. Well, talk about suppression first for a moment. That some people, their family systems were suppressed. Mother was suppressed. Father was suppressed. They didn't talk about their emotions. And so for people out there that have had that background, I really notice what you need to talk about or what needs to come up for you.
Absolutely. We don't get taught that. I mean, I certainly didn't. Whenever I was having an emotion, my mother would say, change your face. Because she didn't know how to, like if I was angry or if I was sad or whatever, change your face.
Change your face. My mom used to say, put on blush and lipstick. Change your face.
Yeah, like to mean your facial expression. So I always need to be okay.
That totally is dismissive.
Oh, totally. And again, I'm not, I've worked through my anger of that. So now I can just see her as she just didn't know. She didn't have the tools. And unfortunately, until I did my work, I unfortunately didn't have the tools to help my daughter through emotions. And really, all emotions need is just to be validated. Wow, honey, I see how angry you are. Or a kid made fun of me at school. Oh, that must have hurt your feelings. As opposed to, well, it doesn't matter. Ignore them because they're dumb. We try to, that's a way of suppressing feelings.
Right. I told you what Lulu said to me when I was back in Texas with my granddaughter, and I said, come on, Lulu, we got to hurry up. We got to go. We got to run because, get your stuff. We got a lot of things to do. And she goes, Gigi, stop. You're pressuring me. And I was like, oh my God.
That is
I guess I am. I meant hurry up. We got to go.
That is so funny. And I love that she feels safe enough with you to have a voice.
I think with anybody, she's going to have a voice.
Oh, yeah, with anybody. But that's because that's what she was taught at home. I mean, Holiday, your daughter's doing just such a great job with the kids, really getting them in touch with their emotions. And
right. I mean, really, I wasn't taught any of that. We would just go right to explode.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people feel that if I name the emotion, whether it's to myself or to my child, I make it worse. I'm indulging it, right? And while it feels counterintuitive, the exact opposite is true. When I name my emotion, wow, I'm feeling really angry right now, it kind of lessens its intensity. I remember I had shared with a friend of mine who had a 4-year-old son, and he was talking about the kid had said something mean. And he said, "Oh, I can see that makes you so sad and that made you angry." And he goes, and all of a sudden the kid just kind of looked at him and go, "It did, Dad." And he grabbed his little face and then he turned around and fell asleep.
Oh my
Something
gosh.
about feeling seen and feeling validated instead of going into, well, don't worry about it. They don't mean anything.
Right.
The feeling is still there, and there becomes, so it gets more intensified.
Right. And
because you're
it's not just
caring.
with little kids. It's with adults. It's in a marriage. It's in all kinds of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's such a difference between when someone says, this hurt my feelings. What you did made me angry. Wow, I'm really sorry. Did that hurt your feelings? All of a sudden, done. As opposed to, well, but I didn't mean it. Or what about when you did, that just revs everything up. And,
please.
At the core of attachment is feeling seen by someone. That feels so safe.
Yeah. And safety is what we're talking about with dysregulation in a world that has been feeling unsafe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't mean just because we're at a time right now, we're feeling more dysregulated. It doesn't mean our nervous system is broken.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with this. It's doing exactly, it's responding exactly what it was designed to do. Yeah. But we can also retrain it in a sense where we can also notice what we're noticing and have tools to help also calm it down. And it's going to go like this. Don't think that if this minute you're calm, but then the next minute you're dysregulated again, oh, that didn't work. Oh, it did. In that moment, you stimulated different parts of your brain, the calm parts of your brain, even if in the next moment you're dysregulated again.
Right.
One moment doesn't erase the moment before.
That is so true, Shirley, because you are allowed to feel. Okay, you are allowed to feel. It is as important to accept your own emotions than anything. But you're not meant to live in constant survival mode, especially spiritually, and that's why we always say that you go in, you get centered. Yeah, the world is going to shake. It's going to do all kinds of things here. But we can do it. We wanted to be here at this time. We can do this. We can do this.
Absolutely. And even, find what works for you, because even at times, like when I scroll through Instagram or something, I very consciously go, okay, right now I'm going to just tune out from the world and scroll for 5 minutes. And I tend to get a little bored, so I don't do it for a lot, but sometimes it'll be 10 minutes have gone by and I've done it. But I very consciously say, I'm going to disconnect right now and just do something.
And then you, as consciously, you connect again.
Right. Exactly.
And you might call a friend. You might again, go outside. There's all kinds of things that you can do to regulate your system.
Exactly. Notice what works for you. Connecting with a friend is really important. Even just calling and say, hey, I needed to connect. Or I needed to talk to someone.
I just need to hear your voice.
Exactly. What you always talk about, walking in nature. Yeah.
I think it's really important, because regulation, Cheryl, is not control. It is safety.
Absolutely. It's about getting through moments that feel threatening, that feel scary, that feel overwhelming. These are wonderful tools to have, because we're going to have those moments, both from a personal standpoint in our lives and as we're experiencing now from a global standpoint.
Right. And, and I want to say something too about grief and loss, because a lot of people have had grief and loss. And perhaps one of the persons that passed away maybe kept them safe. Do you know, all of a sudden they're not safe any longer. They don't feel safe.
Right. That's
a big trigger there. That's a big trigger for people that are in grief, that don't have maybe that safety net that they had before. So we're seeing all kinds of things, but I think everything that we talked about, Shirley, is everything that people can do to help regulate. Ask for help if you need help. Go out and get some help. You can do that.
Absolutely. And don't isolate. We have a huge tendency to isolate when we're going through things. Spending time alone is important, but balance it with reaching out, with connecting.
I have to mention, somebody said, is this the real meaning of take the road less traveled? Which I've always loved that. Thank you. Because I've always loved taking the road less traveled. I love that idea of it. And the question is, does that mean connect with your feelings rather than ignore or suppress them? Yes, because if you have not done this and you have suppressed, then this would be the road in this lifetime that you're going to take that's been less traveled. Do it. And also, it's really something that you do for yourself.
Absolutely. Because, understanding that emotions are energy, and the energy doesn't just disappear because we decide to suppress it or not acknowledge it.
Right.
And all that energy needs is just acknowledgement.
Right.
Just because we acknowledge or validate, I'm angry right now, doesn't mean I have to react in an angry way. The two are very separate. How we feel emotionally and validating that to how we behave or react are two very different things.
Right.
A lot of people are afraid that if I get in touch with my anger, or with my sadness, it's going to grow and I'm going to feel that all the time. And again, the exact opposite is true. When we validate it, it can dissipate. It can go.
Yeah. It's very true. Shirley, it's interesting because when I lost my mom, it was very, very hard for me because she had been the one that was my touchstone, if you will. She was everybody's touchstone. I think she really was, right? She was such a grounder. That was such a big one. So when you've had big loss, everybody, please take care of yourself because grief is grief. And so you might feel really lost at the time, but just hold on with that because grief just comes in waves. And Shirley and I just did a show last week on grief, but we have an interesting next week. Shirley, tell everybody what we're going to be talking about next week, because it's kind of
next week. Yeah, it's the inner child and shadow work. We all have an inner child inside of us.
Yeah.
That lives with us, whether we, notice it or not. And we all have a shadow side, which Carl Jung talked about, the side that we feel shame about. Sometimes it's so repressed that it's even hidden from ourselves. A lot of times we know it there, but we keep it hidden because it brings up a lot of shame. Yeah.
Wow. It's going to be a really interesting discussion.
About self, to get to know ourselves even at deeper levels.
And I think that's the point of the work that we do, Shirley, is we want everybody to learn everything they can possibly about themselves. Everybody learn about yourself. Take away something from today that helps you be mindful. It helps you to get through these very challenging times, but also for your spiritual growth. You've come, this is why you're here on earth at this time. So we're offering some really good tools here.
Yeah. And also to make sense of yourself. I'll never forget when I learned about attachment and what my attachment was. I thought, oh, I make sense.
Right.
Because many times we're left with what's wrong with me.
Right.
There may be things that we want to change about ourselves that we want to shift and understand. Yeah. But understanding yourself through learning these different facets of who we are, takes away the judgment, takes away the what's wrong with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shirley, you and I have a show coming up, a few shows from now, but we have a show coming up about insight doesn't always lead to change.
Right.
So something to think about, everybody. We have lots of good topics.
Yeah. Your mother taught me that a long time ago. Just because we have the insight doesn't mean that we change. That's different. We need insight in order to be able to change, because what we don't know, we can't do anything about. But in and of itself doesn't it? I remember when your mom said that, my brain was.
Oh, because it's a different part of the brain. Inside, the light goes on. Ooh, but then to make a change, you actually have to do the work to make a change.
Right, exactly.
It's a different part of the brain. Right. But I understand it. Okay, well, now do something about it.
Right.
I think that's so funny. Oh my gosh. Well, Shirley, great show. And I look forward to seeing everybody Thursday with me with Ask Me Anything. I'll be talking about the Vedic astrology for April of 2026.
Oh, wow. That'll be great.
A happy Passover, everybody, for tomorrow.
That's right. Happy Passover. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
I'll see you next week, everybody. Bye, Shirley. Thank you.
Bye-bye.